At their heart, each movie poses the audience a question, which by the end it usually will have answered. And it's this question that is the hook that keeps us invested in the story. Sometimes it's as simple as, will he get the girl, or how will they defeat the bad guy? Some movies get more philosophical in their questioning, posing more challenging questions like, how do we reconcile class differences? But how a movie poses that question can be just as interesting as what that question is, or even what the answer is. Because film is a visual medium, so the question doesn't even have to be verbally posed. Sometimes it can be entirely visually posed. The question hidden in plain sight. Indeed, a narratively efficient story would be stupid not to make use of one of its most powerful tools to convey key information to an audience. But because this is information passively absorbed, it can be difficult to put into words how exactly information is being conveyed or what that information is. In this video, I want to look at one of those tools within the visual library and explore how it is used to ask questions of an audience. I want to look at cities and cinema, how they ask us questions and what those are, and why specifically city spaces can offer up answers to those questions that powerfully affect audiences in a way other settings cannot. To start though, I want to make it clear what I'm talking about by first explaining what I'm not talking about. I want you to see a negative before I provide you with a positive. Lots of films use cities as backdrops, but they aren't integral to plot or linked thematically to characters. For instance, in the film 50-50, the action takes place in Seattle, but only because this is an American city familiar to target audiences that helps ground the story. That, and Seattle looks close enough to Vancouver where it was actually filmed. Next up, we have films like The Day After Tomorrow or 2012. In these films, we see a montage of famous cities and landmarks destroyed, but the purpose here is to tug at heartstrings, to make real the destruction the audience is seeing. Witnessing New York swallowed by a tsunami is devastating because of the connections an American audience has to it, but the inclusion of these shots isn't posing any questions. It's just eye candy. Enter the Los Angeles of Blade Runner 2049. 31 years into the future, mankind has largely left the planet to colonize the stars with a workforce built up of bioengineered androids called replicants. Those who remain on the planet live off the scraps. Agent K, our protagonist, is a Blade Runner, a bounty hunter that eliminates escaped replicant slaves. He himself is a replicant, hunting down his own kind while working for the LAPD. Now here, the depiction of Los Angeles is important. The first we see of this city is from above as K returns from a hunt. Los Angeles is a dark place, dominated by shanty towns on the outskirts and imposing monolithic skyscrapers on the interior. The only lights visible are from gaudy neon advertisements until we get down to street level. This is where humanity has retreated to. This is not the city of the original Blade Runner, which was a visual feast of color and lights. It was a dilapidated, yet still hopeful vision for the future. In this version of LA, we can already tell that humanity is on the edge of collapse. Down at street level, things are even worse. Humans of all races and backgrounds have been squished together, and the result is a mishmash society that strips away individuality and cultural identity.
You're in here to work, and if you're not working, I don't need you.
Human lives are worth little as people feed off each other, and base pleasures are catered to in an attempt to drown out the sorrows of the world. Street signs and characters speak in languages unfamiliar to the audience, so that what should be familiar settings are made alien. The viewer is denied any foothold in this world. Already I'm hoping that you're starting to see that the setting of Los Angeles is more than just a backdrop. In a way, it is a character. It embodies very clear traits. It is a city that has lost its way and is suffering from a moral decay that affects everyone within, a fact that we are reminded of constantly through characters' actions. Police Chief Joshi tries to solicit her underling Kay for sex.
What happens if I finish that?
Shouldn't I get back to work, madam?
The merchant Dr. Badger tries to swindle Kay out of a valuable artifact, and Kay's colleagues are constantly mistreating him through threats and casual bigotry.
Fuck off, skin job.
This isn't a setting that can be swapped out for another. You couldn't switch this city with Seattle or New York. 2049's Los Angeles affects what goes on in the story, and decays everyone from within. And it's a decay that affects Kay himself. Throughout much of the first half of the movie, Kay barely shows any emotion. He is a beaten down shell who looks for meaning the way everyone else does. He wants to experience what it's like to be human, so he has a virtual hologram wife and goes through the motions of living out the standard family dynamic as best he can.
I missed you, baby sweet.
But it is a hollow experience, as shots like this make painfully clear. He cannot be intimate with his love, and later we find out in a devastating scene that Joy's entire existence was just a program acting out its code and nothing more. Her love was simply programmed responses to stimuli.
You look lonely. I can fix that.
And this is where the questioning comes in, for in a world where the usual markers of identity, one's individuality and culture, have been stripped away and society is rotted down to its core, how then do we rekindle what it means to be human? That is the question the film, almost solely through visuals, poses to the audience. That question is never explicitly said, yet in the way the city is crafted and conveyed to the viewer, it might as well be. In case you're still unsure, let me bring up another example. In the 1995 film Ghost in the Shell, police officer Motoko Kusanagi must track down a notorious hacker to prevent him from leaking sensitive government secrets. The story takes place in the fictional futuristic Japanese city of Newport. It is a city of towering glass monoliths and crumbling hovels. The city in this movie was based off of Hong Kong from the early 1990s. It is a city defined by its duality and the conflict that arises between the different aspects of itself. The old and new, the poor and rich, the backwards and the technologically advanced, all battle for dominance. And in case it wasn't clear enough, there's even a 3-minute long dialogue-free montage of the city in the middle of the movie that lets audiences really get to know the setting they are in, and lets them absorb this central conflict. The city is at odds with its two sides, trying to reconcile humanity with the exponential rise of technology. The question becomes what it means to be human in a world where that definition is constantly changing due to technological advancement. And like Blade Runner 2049, the issues the city faces are faced by our characters as well. Most inhabitants have some level of mechanical enhancement, but Kusanagi is a cyborg, a human with an entirely robot body. She struggles to demarcate where the woman ends and the machine begins. This is further complicated by the fact people's minds, or ghosts, can be hacked and false memories and personalities can be implanted. Kusanagi is not entirely sure she is human anymore, or if she ever was. This too is primarily imparted visually and enhanced by the context the characters find themselves in. I could go on, looking at films like Akira, Dread, and even older examples like Metropolis, but I want to move on to look at one final aspect of these spaces that in my mind holds the key to why this really matters. Because on the surface, what I've said is perhaps kind of obvious. People shape space, yes, but space shapes people. We simultaneously create and are created by the places we inhabit. Characters in film are likewise defined by the spaces we find them in, regardless of if it's an urban center or not. In The Fellowship of the Ring, before we ever get to know our hero Frodo Baggins, we are given a long and detailed look at Hobbiton, his home. However, by the time Frodo and Gandalf arrive at Bilbo's door, we have a pretty good idea of who Frodo is based on his surroundings. He is a genial, kind-hearted, simple soul who loves nature and lives a carefree life. And for an example that visually more closely resembles a dystopia like Los Angeles, the crew of the Nostromo and Alien can be inferred to be a rough and tumble, self-sufficient, working-class bunch based on the harsh environment we find them in. But obviously these settings are extremely dissimilar to the city in more ways than just physical. The missing elements from settings like the Shire or the Nostromo are twofold. They lack the social context of the space we ourselves inhabit and the human element that we live with. In a 2016 study, the UN found that around 55% of all human beings live in cities. You, the viewer watching right now, likely are doing so from inside a city. Recently, it has become, for the first time in our species' history, the norm to live in an urban, not rural environment. And this trend shows no sign of reversing. With that massive change comes questions and fears about the future we are stepping into and how to meet those challenges. In an essay, Michel Foucault wrote, "I believe that the anxiety of our era has to do fundamentally with space." He puts forth that in every space we examine, we see two things: the space as it is, and the possibility for a more perfect version, a utopia. And that is why the depiction of cities in these films is so powerful. They present us with the version we see ourselves every day of our own living spaces. They show us these flawed places that embody the fears we ourselves are feeling. The fear of rapid technological advancement, the fear of loss of identity, the fear of losing our very concept of what it means to be human. But in these films, we also see the utopia. At the climax of Ghost in the Shell, after finally tracking down the hacker, Kusanagi discovers it is actually an artificial intelligence that wishes to merge consciousnesses with her to form a more perfect being, which they do. In doing this, the film answers the question of how to reconcile the frightening new technology. We must accept it as part of our journey in evolution. Accept that technology will enhance us and become a part of us. The last shot of the film is a reverse of the first shot of the film. Instead of being looked up at and made vulnerable by the camera, a confident Kusanagi looks down on the city, having conquered her fears. She is now ready to face the future. 2049 also offers up answers. Agent K's virtual wife is ripped away from him, as are all the hollow comforts he had relied upon to give his life meaning. And at the end, we finally get the answer to how to stay human in a world that has lost its moral center.
Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
It is only through empathy and self-sacrifice that we can reverse the effects of this dark world. K's story isn't one of grand change and revolution. Over the course of the movie, all he really accomplishes in the grand scheme of things is to reunite a father with his long-lost child. But that is enough. In the original Blade Runner, all Deckard did was learn that replicants were human too. He didn't start some grand revolution, but in becoming a more complete, empathetic human, he did set up the seeds for one. In a way, at the end of 2049, we are left to wonder what effect K's sacrifice will have on the world. The last we see of K, he has been removed from the city which has rotted him for so long. He is finally at peace, with symbolically cleansing snow falling upon him. Mark Twain once wrote of cities, "A man walks through his tedious miles through the same interminable street every day, elbowing his way through a buzzing multitude of men, yet never seeing a familiar face." And really, I can't think of a more succinct way to encapsulate the anxiety that cities put into us. But in having movies where the cities embody this anxiety, in posing the question we ourselves face in an urban world, we can explore answers. And in answering these questions, we experience catharsis.